Hey friends, how are you doing tonight? I know, you're probably lying there, wrapped in your blanket, maybe scrolling through videos, maybe just thinking about sleep. But tonight, I'm taking you back in time. Not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of years, to a moment when the very definition of being human was being written for the first time. Tonight we're taking a journey, not across oceans or into the depths of space, but deep into time itself, to a world that's both familiar and completely alien. We're going to meet the humans who came long before us. Picture this. You're standing on the dusty shores of a vast, glittering lake. It's not a place you'd find on any map. Before you lies ancient Lake Turkana, 2 million years in the past. Before we continue, now tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? So let's start. The sun burns hotter here, sharper, and the sky is a deeper blue than anything you've ever seen, wide and untouched by jet trails. Far in the distance, the shapes of sleeping volcanoes blur against the horizon. The air carries no hint of fuel or fresh-cut grass, only dust, volcanic minerals, and the damp, earthy scent of unfamiliar plants. Huge prehistoric elephants with downward curving tusks wade through the shallows, while the eerie cry of a strange bird echoes across the water. This is the cradle of our species, the nursery of humankind. But then, something stirs. By the water's edge, movement catches your eye. A small group is foraging among the reeds. Even from afar, their forms seem hauntingly familiar. They walk upright on two legs, their shadows long and dark in the afternoon light. It's a family, and as you focus on them, you start to notice the differences. The leader, a male, glances upward, and his face is not quite human. His forehead slopes low, a thick ridge of bone sits above his eyes, and his jaw juts forward without a chin. His arms are just a little too long, his legs a little too short. He's not an ape, but he's not fully one of us either. He's something in between, a lost branch of our own family tree. These are the beings who laid the foundation for everything that would follow. Over the next 2 million years, their descendants would begin one of the most extraordinary journeys in Earth's history. They would learn to see a tool hidden within a stone, striking flakes from a core to create the first technology. They would face their fear of the night and of the predators within it, and eventually tame fire, gathering around its glow for safety and warmth. They would leave this African cradle, driven by curiosity and changing climates, spreading across Asia and Europe. Their minds and bodies would adapt, transforming with each new challenge. New kinds of humans would emerge, the master hunters of Ice Age Europe, perfectly built for the cold, the ghost lineages of Asia, known to us only through a fragment of bone and a strand of DNA, and the tiny, almost mythical island dwellers who once hunted dwarf elephants. Who were these others, these alternate versions of humanity? And after millions of years of diversity, why are we the only ones left to wonder what happened to the rest? What does their long, epic story and their final, silent disappearance reveal about what it truly means to be human? Thanks to generations of paleontologists digging through forgotten landscapes, we're finally piecing together their world. And tonight, we're going to walk through it. Together. Honestly, if you were dropped into that time without a time machine, you probably wouldn't last long. You'd be a quick snack for a saber-toothed cat before you even figured out which way was north. So before we get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big message to the algorithm that thoughtful, educational content still matters. And for me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. I always love seeing where you're watching from, So let me know in the comments where you are in the world and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's drift together into tonight's journey, before the dawn, the crucible of our creation. Before we can meet the players, we need to understand the stage. Our story doesn't begin with a person, or even a pre-person. It begins with the Earth itself. Long before the first hominin took an upright step, the planet was preparing the scene. Continents drifted at the speed your fingernails grow, colliding in slow, silent crashes that pushed up mountains and reshaped the surface. The world swung between warmth and deep freeze, glaciers advancing and retreating, trapping oceans in ice and transforming the global climate. It's a story of staggering timescales, of forces so vast they're almost beyond comprehension. And in one particular corner of this restless planet, those forces built the perfect laboratory for evolution, a place that would become the engine of our creation. That place lies in Africa, a scar ripped across the continent, a land of fire and upheaval. It's where our journey truly begins. This scar, stretching thousands of miles from the Middle East down to Mozambique, is the Great Rift Valley, a continent slowly tearing itself apart. For millions of years, immense pressure deep within the Earth's mantle has been pulling the Somali tectonic plate away from the rest of Africa, stretching the crust above it like warm taffy. In some regions, the ground cracked and sank in massive blocks, creating a valley floor thousands of feet below the surrounding highlands. Volcanoes erupted through those fractures, pouring ash and lava, raising mountains like Kilimanjaro from the plains. You are standing in a geological construction zone, a work still in progress after 30 million years. But that violence, the chaos, was exactly what made the Rift Valley the perfect birthplace for life to evolve. It wasn't one single environment. The towering cliffs cast huge rain shadows, creating extremes, one side lush and green, the other dry and barren. Rivers carved through the rock, filling a chain of long, narrow lakes across the valley floor. The result was an incredibly diverse landscape: forests, open woodlands, endless savannas, and marshy lake edges, all within a single day's walk. That constant change was the key. In the Rift Valley, when one world ended, another began just over the ridge. And it was here, in this ever-shifting cradle of life, that our ancestors took their first steps toward becoming human. It created countless tiny pockets and hidden corners where small, isolated populations of animals were tested, shaped, and transformed by the pressures of their surroundings. That's why the Rift Valley is every paleoanthropologist's dream. It's one thing for a creature to live and die. It's something else entirely for its bones to survive for millions of years. To make that happen, you need very specific conditions, and the Rift Valley had them all. Its many lakes and rivers made it the perfect place for preservation. An animal that died near the water might quickly be covered by silt and mud, sealing its bones away from scavengers and the elements. Then came the volcanoes, the second vital ingredient. Every so often, one of the great peaks would erupt, blanketing the entire landscape in a fine grey ash. That ash turned out to be a gift to science. It carried radioactive elements, most importantly, an isotope called potassium-40. Over immense spans of time, this unstable element decays into argon-40 gas at a perfectly steady, predictable rate. It's a built-in geological clock. By measuring the ratio of potassium to argon in a layer of ash, scientists can pinpoint, with incredible precision, exactly when that eruption occurred. So, if you uncover a fossil skeleton lying just beneath a layer of volcanic rock dated to 3.2 million years ago, you instantly know your fossil is at least that old. That's the scientific foundation behind our entire story. The Rift Valley is like a layered cake of time, with the fossils of our ancestors hidden between the pages. And what a world those pages reveal. As you walk this ancient land, the wildlife feels both strange and strangely familiar. You'd see herds of zebra and antelope, but they're hunted by predators you've only ever seen behind glass in museums. A saber-toothed cat, Dinophelis, prowls through the tall grass, its enormous canines tucked behind snarling lips. You'd steer clear of the riverbanks, not just because of crocodiles, but because of something that looks like an elephant, yet isn't. That's Dinotherium, a massive creature with tusks curving downward from its lower jaw, likely used to strip bark from trees. In the nearby woodlands, troops of giant baboons, some as big as modern gorillas, move noisily through the trees, far more intimidating than their descendants today. The air hums with the sounds of this lost world, a world where our ancestors were not the masters, but just another species fighting to see another sunrise. One of the most famous slices of this ancient layer cake lies in Tanzania, a place called Oldowan Gorge. It's a smaller canyon that cuts into the plains, revealing almost 2 million years of geological and human history. Sometimes called the Grand Canyon of Prehistory, it was discovered completely by accident. In 1911, a German entomologist named Wilhelm Kattwinkel was in the area collecting butterflies. Chasing one too far, he nearly fell over a cliff, and in doing so, noticed fossilized bones sticking out from the gorge's steep walls. That single accident changed the course of paleoanthropology forever. Yet even with this perfect natural stage, scientists still debate whether the Rift Valley's shifting landscape was truly the main engine driving early human evolution. Was it this dynamic, unstable environment that forced our ancestors to walk upright and sharpen their intelligence? Or were there larger global forces at work, like worldwide climate shifts, with the rift simply being the place where the evidence happened to survive? The debate continues. But one thing is certain: it was here, in this wild, beautiful, and ever-changing landscape, that the first characters in our human story took their first steps. And on this stage of fire and shifting ground, our first protagonists appear. They aren't yet human, not quite. They are our deep ancestors, the Australopithecines, a diverse, thriving group whose name means southern apes. For decades, scientists saw them as just that, a slightly unusual kind of ape. They had small brains, forward-jutting faces, and long, powerful arms still built for climbing. In many ways, they were still tied to life in the trees. But they had one revolutionary trait, one that changed everything. They walked on two legs. For years, the evidence was scarce: a fragment of skull here, a tooth there, ghosts in the fossil record. Then, in 1974, everything changed. A young American paleoanthropologist named Donald Johanson was surveying a sun-baked gully in Ethiopia's Hadar region when something caught his eye. It wasn't a tooth or a jaw, it was part of an arm bone, then another, and another. Over the next few weeks, his team uncovered one of the greatest discoveries in human history: a skeleton about 40% complete, belonging to a female Australopithecine who had lived and died here 3.2 million years ago. Back at camp that night, the Beatles' song, "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds," played over and over, and the name stuck. Lucy became a revelation. She was the first ancient hominin complete enough to give us a clear picture of what our ancestors really looked like. She stood barely 3.5 feet tall, weighing around 60 pounds. Her upper body was still ape-like: long arms, strong shoulders, and curved fingers built for climbing. For her, trees still meant food and safety from predators after dark. But her lower body told another story. Her pelvis was short and bowl-shaped, almost identical to ours, perfectly designed to support the body in an upright stance. Her thigh bones angled inward, bringing her knees beneath her center of gravity, allowing her to walk smoothly, step by step, instead of wobbling side to side. Lucy was built to walk. This was a groundbreaking revelation, and the final proof came 4 years later in Tanzania. A team led by Mary Leakey discovered a trail of fossilized footprints preserved in volcanic ash at a site called Laetoli, left by 2, maybe 3 hominins walking across wet ground 3.6 million years ago. The prints were unmistakable: a heel strike, a roll forward, and a push-off from the big toe, a footprint almost identical to yours. That big toe, crucially, was aligned with the rest of the foot, not splayed out like a chimp's. This was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof that ancient hominins like Lucy walked upright long before Homo sapiens ever appeared. Bipedalism, walking on 2 legs, became the first defining trait of the human lineage. It was the first domino to fall. Why it happened remains debated. Maybe it helped them see over tall grass. Maybe it helped keep them cool. Or maybe, most importantly, it freed their hands to carry food, infants, and eventually tools. Imagine Lucy and her family moving through the patchwork of woodland and grassland, gathering fruit, nuts, seeds, insects, and scavenging scraps of meat when they could, always alert, always aware, always prey. Their lives were a fragile balance between safety in the trees and survival on the ground. For nearly 1 million years, Lucy's kind thrived like this, walking a line between 2 worlds. But the Earth itself was about to change again. Around 3 million years ago, the planet's thermostat began to drop. Slowly, glaciers grew at the poles, locking away massive amounts of water and reshaping global climates. Africa began to dry. The great forests receded, and open grasslands took their place. This gave rise to one of the most powerful theories in human evolution, the Savannah hypothesis. As the forests disappeared, life in the trees became harder. Safety was farther away, food more scattered. The environment had changed the rules. Now the creatures who could travel efficiently across long distances, who could walk upright, spot predators, and cooperate, had the advantage. The open plains offered danger, but also opportunity. Vast herds of grazing animals, rich, mobile food sources for any species clever enough to hunt them. The savannah, in this view, was the crucible. It forged endurance, intelligence, and a taste for meat, traits that would soon define our genus. This was no gentle change. It was an evolutionary stress test. Species too specialized for the forest vanished. Others adapted, migrated, or died out. But out of this brutal trial, something new began to emerge. A creature with a slightly larger brain and a revolutionary new idea about what you could do with a stone. Today, scientists still debate the true influence of the classic Savannah hypothesis. More and more researchers now lean toward a different explanation called the variability selection model. This idea suggests that what really shaped human evolution wasn't just the spread of grasslands, it was the instability of the climate itself. The Earth began swinging wildly between periods of extreme wetness and dryness, and that unpredictable, chaotic world didn't reward specialists, it rewarded generalists, creatures with bigger, more adaptable brains, ones who could shift strategies on the fly, improvise, and survive when their environment flipped overnight. The real evolutionary pressure wasn't about being a savanna dweller, it was about being a problem solver. And right on cue, a new kind of problem solver appeared. Homo habilis, the handyman. Under the blazing Tanzanian sun, in the bone-dry landscape of Oldowan Gorge, 2 figures became legends of the desert, Louis and Mary Leakey. For more than 3 decades, beginning in the 1930s, the Leakeys devoted their lives to this stretch of the Great Rift Valley. It was their obsession, the belief that the story of humanity's origins was buried in those layers of ancient dust. Through suffocating heat, choking dust storms,
and years of heartbreakingly fragmentary finds, they searched for one thing: the maker of the mysterious stone tools scattered everywhere. Thousands of them, chipped river cobbles, shaped by some intelligent hand nearly 2 million years ago. But whose hand? For years, the maker was a ghost, until, in the early 1960s, their persistence finally paid off. Their son Jonathan uncovered the fossilized remains of a new kind of hominin, not like the robust Australopithecines they'd found before, but something different. The skull fragments showed a rounder, larger brain case. The lower jaw had smaller, more delicate molars. And the hands, those were the real clue. The bones suggested a precision grip, the kind you'd need to hold a hammerstone in one hand and a core in the other, striking them together deliberately, with skill and purpose. The Leakeys put the puzzle together: a larger brain, smaller teeth, dexterous hands, and stone tools lying in the same layer of rock. Their conclusion shocked the scientific world. This, they said, was the toolmaker, the first true human ancestor. They named it Homo habilis, Latin for handyman. It was a radical claim. At the time, the genus Homo was reserved for beings like the Neanderthals or ourselves, large-brained, unmistakably human. To include this small 2-million-year-old creature meant completely redrawing the human family tree. It pushed the dawn of humanity back more than 1 million years and argued that technology itself, the moment we began shaping tools, was the birth certificate of humankind. So what did Homo habilis actually look like? If you could meet one face to face, you'd immediately notice its in-between nature. Its brain was around 600 cubic centimeters, roughly 30% bigger than an Australopithecines, but still less than half the size of ours. Its face jutted out less, its jaw was finer, its teeth smaller, hints of a diet that was changing, maybe towards softer foods or more meat. Perhaps these early humans were pounding or cutting food with tools instead of grinding it endlessly with their jaws. But from the neck down, they still carried the past within them. Their long arms told the story, proportions much like Australopithecus. They still climbed, they still slept in trees. They were not yet masters of the world, just survivors in it. Most scientists agree that Homo habilis lived from about 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago. And they weren't alone. For much of that time, they shared Africa with other hominins, late Australopithecines, and eventually the first members of the next great species, Homo erectus. It was a crowded, competitive world. In many ways, Homo habilis was a bridge, a blend of old and new. 1 foot still in the trees, still small and vulnerable, but the other stepping firmly into a new reality, one powered by intelligence, curiosity, and technology. They weren't shaping the world yet, but they were learning how. One sharp stone flake at a time, the Oldowan Toolkit, the dawn of technology. When you hear stone tools, you might picture sleek arrowheads or hefty axes. Forget that image completely. The world's first toolkit, the one used by Homo habilis, was far simpler, more basic, and far more revolutionary.
Archaeologists call it the Oldowan industry, named after Oldowan Gorge, where thousands of these tools were first found. These weren't weapons for mighty hunters. They were practical instruments, a portable butcher's kit for cutting, scraping, and cracking bones. Picture yourself by a dry riverbed, the hardware store of the early Stone Age. You pick up a hard, heavy stone that fits in your hand. That's your hammerstone. Then you find another, slightly softer, maybe volcanic rock or flint. That's your core. Now, holding the core in one hand, you strike it sharply with the hammerstone. If you do it right, a flake flies off, razor sharp. The core, now with a jagged edge, can smash open bones for marrow. But the real treasure is that flake itself, sharper than steel, light and deadly efficient. It's the Stone Age scalpel, perfect for slicing hide, cutting meat, or carving through tendons in seconds. For a small scavenger living among lions, speed was survival. These flakes let them grab what they could and escape before bigger predators arrived. We know what these ancient tools were used for, thanks to useware analysis. Under a microscope, each flake carries its own history, scratches, chips, and polish that reveal what it cut. Meat leaves one pattern, wood another, plant fibers another still. This is how we know Homo habilis used their tools for butchering, cutting, scraping, even shaping wooden sticks for digging. But the real significance of the Oldowan tools isn't just what they did, it's what they meant. This was the birth of manufacturing. To make even the simplest flake required planning, foresight, knowledge, and imagination. You had to know which rocks would fracture, visualize the edge hidden inside, and strike just right to bring it out. This was humanity's first creative act, imposing an idea from the mind onto the physical world. For a long time, archaeologists thought piles of tools and bones marked early home bases, like primitive campsites. But newer research suggests otherwise. These were more likely scavenging or butchering spots, places where Homo habilis darted in, grabbed what they could, and vanished. Not cozy hearths, but scenes of desperate, dangerous meals. And yet, this simple toolkit, hammerstone, core, and flake, changed everything. It remained the dominant technology on Earth for over 1 million years, barely changing, never improved upon. The most successful design in human history. A humble idea that worked, and kept working, for an unimaginable span of time. That incredible longevity presented the Leakeys with one last dilemma, a choice that would echo through the halls of anthropology for decades to come. Where exactly did this strange creature belong in the vast story of human evolution? Was this handy man, with its larger brain and skillful hands, simply an advanced type of Australopithecine? Or was it something more? Could this be the earliest glimmer of our own kind, the very first member of the genus Homo? This wasn't just a dry academic argument over Latin names. It was about drawing a line in the ancient dust of history. It was about pinpointing the exact moment when our ancestors stopped being merely upright apes and started walking the long path toward becoming human. To make their case, Louis and Mary Leakey, alongside their colleagues Philip Tobias and John Napier, built their argument on 3 main pillars. 3 key traits, they said, that set Homo habilis apart from the Australopithecines and earned it a place in the human family. The first was posture. From the leg and foot bones found, they could tell habilis walked fully upright on 2 legs. While earlier species like the Australopithecines also walked on 2 feet, this upright stance was still seen as the essential foundation of humanity, the physical platform on which everything else was built. The second pillar was manual dexterity. The hand bones unearthed in Oldowan Gorge told a fascinating story. They were sturdier than a modern human's, but clearly different from an ape's. The fingers were straighter, the palm broader, and the thumb longer and more flexible. This was a hand made not for swinging through trees, but for grasping, holding, and shaping. It could perform a precision grip, the ability to pinch an object delicately between the thumb and fingertips. That's the grip that makes both crafting and wielding a stone tool possible. But the third pillar was the clincher, the one piece of evidence the Leakeys believed no one could dispute, the tools themselves. The sheer number of Oldowan tools, their uniform design, and their direct association with habilis fossils were, to them, undeniable proof. An ape might occasionally pick up a stick or rock, but it doesn't mass-produce thousands of them in the same style. That, they argued, required something more, a culture, the passing of knowledge and technique from one generation to the next. Louis Leakey famously declared that the combination of a bigger brain and a lasting tool-making tradition marked what he called humanity's cerebral Rubicon. The phrase was deliberate, a nod to the historical moment when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, sealing the fate of the Roman Republic. There was no turning back. Likewise, Leakey argued, once our ancestors began shaping tools, they had crossed their own Rubicon, a point of no return. They had entered a new cognitive world. They had become human. It was a compelling story, clear, elegant, and deeply satisfying. First came the Australopithecines, like Lucy, our ape-like ancestors who had learned to walk but not much more. Then arrived Homo habilis, the clever handyman who invented tools and ignited the spark of human intelligence. For a while that story held strong. It fit neatly into the linear narrative of progress we love to tell ourselves. But science has a way of challenging even the most beautiful ideas. And soon, the ground beneath that tidy three-pillar house began to shake. The first tremor came just a decade after Homo habilis was named. In 1974, the discovery of Lucy delivered the first shock. Her skeleton, especially her pelvis and thigh bones, proved beyond doubt that Australopithecines were already expert walkers. Then, in 1978, the second and even more powerful quake struck, the Laetoli footprints. Two sets of tracks pressed into volcanic ash 3.6 million years ago captured two of Lucy's kind walking side by side with a stride nearly identical to our own. Suddenly, the first pillar, the argument that Homo habilis was special because it walked upright, collapsed. Bipedalism wasn't a new invention of Homo at all. It was an ancient ability, perfected over 1 million years earlier by Lucy's ancestors. Walking on two legs wasn't a defining trait of humanity, it was just the starting point. For decades, the other two pillars, those clever hands and the tool culture, seemed unshaken. Habilis, it was believed, may not have been the first to walk, but it was the first to think. Then, in 2015, came the discovery that changed everything. At a site in Kenya called Lomekwi 3, archaeologists uncovered a collection of stone tools. They were large, rough, and primitive, cruder than the Oldowan tools. But what truly stunned researchers was their age, 3.3 million years old. That's 700,000 years older than the first appearance of Homo habilis. The implications were explosive. The handyman wasn't the first toolmaker after all. The invention of technology, our supposed evolutionary Rubicon, had been crossed by someone else far earlier. The most likely culprit? An Australopithecine, perhaps even Lucy's own species. The first toolmaker wasn't human, it was an ape man. And the evidence didn't stop there. At the site of Dikika in Ethiopia, the same place where the fossilized remains of a 3-year-old Australopithecine child were found, researchers discovered animal bones dated to 3.4 million years ago. On their surfaces were microscopic cut marks and deep grooves, the unmistakable scars of stone tools used to slice meat and crack bones for marrow. There were no tools at the site, but the marks told the story clearly. Some early hominin had been butchering animals with stone tools nearly 1 million years before Homo habilis existed. With all three of its defining traits now stripped away, the identity of Homo habilis crumbled. It wasn't uniquely upright, it didn't have a monopoly on dexterity, and it wasn't the first to make tools. Everything that once justified its place in our genus had fallen apart. So the question became unavoidable. If Homo habilis wasn't special in any of those ways, what was it doing in the genus Homo at all? Today, that debate still rages. Many scientists argue that Homo habilis should be reclassified as Australopithecus habilis, a slightly smarter, tool-using ape. Others suggest it's so distinct it deserves an entirely new genus. But for now, tradition holds sway. Homo habilis remains where it is, not because the evidence demands it, but because rewriting textbooks, museum exhibits, and decades of research would be too monumental a task. In the end, Homo habilis stands as a species in limbo, a ghost lingering at the base of our family tree. And so, scientists were left searching for a new definition. If toolmaking no longer marked the birth of humanity, then what did? The answer, they decided, lay not in what our ancestors did, but in what they were. If behavior was proving too unpredictable to define, maybe the answer lay in something simpler: raw anatomy, specifically inside the skull. After all, the story of human evolution is, at its core, the story of an expanding, reorganizing brain. Scientists began to think that the key might lie in measurable brain power, that a clear physical increase in brain volume could mark the threshold of what it meant to be human.